Hello, this is Glenn Schlender, Superintendent of the Luxembourg-Casco School District, coming to you with some responses to some common questions, issues, and objections we have heard as we've prepared to have a referendum for some school improvements and updates scheduled for April 3rd. By way of an agenda, I'd like to cover these topics. First of all, the design of the scope of the referendum, whether these are preliminary designs or whether they've been finalized. One of the comments we've heard is, I don't like a certain aspect of or something. Specific to that, there are some things that have come up that we want to address around the practice space for wrestling at the proposed middle school, some agri-science spaces, as well as music rooms at the middle school. Also, some comments about how the referendum is all about athletics in the gym, and I'd like to address that. The idea of moving the middle school kids to the high school is a bad idea. I'd like to give some insight into that as well. And then finally, a response to some questions we've heard about what happens if both questions fail. With regard to the design, there's a misconception, I think, that people look at the drawings that are out there and think that those are the finalized blueprints of what the project will be. And that really is not the case. Those are very preliminary designs. And if the referendum passes, we will enter into about a 6-week-long design phase where the folks who are primarily going to be using those spaces, we refer to them as stakeholders, will be asked for lots and lots of input about the size of the space, the layout of the spaces, how they're furnished and equipped and so forth. So lots of decisions are yet to be made, but won't be made until and unless the referendum is passed. Specifically, I mentioned some concerns about the size of the wrestling practice space at the middle school. That has not been finalized. And as a matter of fact, I have scheduled a meeting with the leadership of the high school and middle school wrestling programs, along with athletic directors and so forth, to examine some options. And I think one of the most promising options is one that would provide significantly more practice space than is currently at the middle school in Casco. Similar kind of situation for agri-science. There's not anything specifically in the referendum project to address agri-science, but there's so much flexibility in the design and in the costing that will allow us to do some updating potentially in those agri-science rooms. Finally, with regard to music rooms at the middle school, there's been lots of commentary about that. To put it very plainly, at the middle school and high school, in terms of vocal and instrumental music, there are 11 classes. And at the high school, we have 2 music rooms, a choir room and a band room, and we have an A day, B day. So to put it very simply, there are 16 time slots over the course of those 2 days for secondary music, and there are 11 secondary music classes. So we can easily put 11 classes into 16 time slots. It's going to mean some teachers may have to share, but we think that's a much more cost-effective approach. Concern about the referendum being all about the gym. The fact of the matter is that about 25% of the cost of the entire referendum project, questions 1 and 2, is athletic spaces, and the remaining portions, 75%, are about security issues and updating instructional spaces. In terms of the middle school being a bad idea, one of the things that I've been sharing with people is that we have kids at the high school who struggle because they are not having a good chance at success, because they can benefit greatly, we believe, from a more individualized approach and from a more specialized approach. So in other words, in a setting where a student is with his or her friends and they're struggling, oftentimes a lot of disruptive behaviors appear because they don't want their friends to know that they're struggling. And when you put them in a one-on-one setting, those behaviors go away and they're much more reasonable to deal with, and they're much more willing to focus on the learning task at hand and can accomplish those things. And so that use for the middle school in Casco we believe will present much more hope for brighter futures for those kids who struggle in that traditional high school setting. And finally, what happens if both questions fail? One of the specific questions is, will you come back next year? And the answer is no, we won't come back next year. This is a long process that involves lots and lots of time and design and consideration. So it would be at least a couple years before we would come back with another proposal if both questions failed. Keeping in mind that construction costs typically, on average, go up about 5% per year. And so if you do the math and take a look at both questions, which is $27.9 million, and add 5 or 10% onto that, it'll very, very likely would cost more down the road, which is why we think this is the right time to have a referendum given those costs. So we will continue to speak with the community and anyone interested in wanting to learn more about the referendum, and we will potentially come back if more questions arise. You can certainly expect that we would come back and produce another small video clip like this to address any questions that come up between now and Election Day, which is April 3rd. Thank you for your attention.